Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning for Intentional Conversations. And as we do, for everybody who's here for the first time, please could you tell us who you are and where you're joining us from in chat. My name is Rachel Munyaradzi, and I'm the Senior Director of Client Success at Nika White Consulting. And I'll be stepping in for Nika today for our Intentional Conversations. So without further ado, So Intentional Conversations is a VodCast where we discuss the intersection of DEI for all DEI leaders. And this week, I come to this space with a heavy heart. We've all had to go about our business, but I just wanted for us to all begin by just taking a moment of silence to remember the lives that were lost this week in Buffalo. I find that sometimes, or actually all the times, the lives that we live, we're going from one thing to the other, and we never really take the moment to stop and to pause and reflect on the things that actually affect us. So what happened in Buffalo this week, I know for me was very hard and very challenging, because as a DEI practitioner, you feel like we're making progress as a community, and then something like this happens and you're impacted, but you get up and you keep going. But I was with a mom yesterday who was saying she didn't want her son to go to the grocery store. He's 13 years old, and she says, but he's tall Black boy. And all of a sudden she had anxiety over him going to the grocery store, and only recently had she begun to allow him to go to the grocery store. So these things impact us, and it's always important to center ourselves and to focus on to create space for it. So, but at Nika White Consulting, we always like to highlight different events that are going on, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So just a reminder to everyone that May is a mental health awareness month, and also Asian American Pacific Islanders Heritage Month as well. And we wanted to also highlight the people we will have coming up for the show. And Friday, May 27th, please join us. We will have Rochelle, Rochelle Carice here with us, sharing with us. And we will be discussing her new ebook, Emotional Intelligence, a toolkit for DEI, emotional intelligence myths and whys, and why emotional intelligence is crucial to DEI. And then we will have Pascal Lachambe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And he will be here with us on June 3rd, when we will discuss the intersection of neurobiology, neuroscience, and DEI, cultural intelligence and competence, and the Synergies Shared Humanity Framework. And without further ado, today I want to welcome today's co-host, Janelle Benjamin. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Janelle Benjamin, who is here with us, and I'm going to highlight her. Janelle Benjamin has a BA and a JD, and is the founder and CEO of All Things Equitable, Inc., a global management consulting firm addressing inequities in workplace for all historically marginalized groups. It helps organizations to be diverse, inclusive, safe, and supportive of the mental health and well-being of all their people. Janelle obtained a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Toronto. She obtained her law degree with a litigation certificate of concentration from Western Michigan Cooley Law School. She has a certificate in process management from Excellence Canada, a certificate in workplace mental health leadership from Queen's University, and a certificate in reconciliation education for the workplace from First Nations University of Canada. Janelle is also a certified diversity and belonging facilitator and is certified in joint health and safety for management under Occupational Health and Safety Act, Ontario. Janelle, as we always do in this forum, after reading the bio, we'll ask you to introduce yourself to our community and maybe tell us something that is not expressed or shared within this bio. So Janelle, I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for welcoming me to the show. And something that's not typically expressed is that I'm an introvert. And so that very lengthy introduction is highly embarrassing, but very, very lovely that you took the time to do that, to profile me and to share. Just another thing that is just about me. I'm, first generation Canadian based in Toronto, Canada. My parents immigrated from the Caribbean, and so my roots are, through Trinidad and Tobago, and I see the world through the lens sometimes of my immigrant parents and the barriers that they faced, and the barriers that I still face and continue to face here. And so a lot of the work that I do is intersectional, based on both my lived experience as well as my professional experience. And so I've suffered my own harms and traumas and things through the workplace. And so I kind of roll that all up into one endeavor to support organizations and how to stop the harms and experiences that so many people have in the workplace. So thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go right into some of the things that I'd like to discuss with you. Amora, who you did the prep call with, let me know that there was a documentary or a series on Netflix to watch. And the series is White Hot, The Rise and Fall of Abercrombie and Fitch. And it centers around exclusivity and exclusion. So I watched it yesterday and my eyes were this big because I was thinking of all the advertising that I had been a part of, and just watching how people would go to malls and their target market and how everything happened. So would you like to share with us, please, how DEI practitioners can prevent or transform a workplace rife with exclusionary practices and culture, and also why that documentary on Netflix, which I think everybody should watch, is something that you're very interested in?
Yeah, first of all, that documentary, it was buzzing around, right? I started to hear about it and I'm like, okay, what is this documentary? Everyone's talking about White Hot, Abercrombie, what's going on here? It's on Netflix, and I took a look, and it spoke to me personally, right? As a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, it does speak to the realities that we face and the practicalities of doing this work in spaces where, sometimes our recommendations are not always considered, and organizations are largely homogenous and exclusive and deliberately exclusionary of certain groups of people. And so, the documentary, not to spoil it for a lot of people if you haven't seen it, it just focuses on the brand, the Abercrombie and Fitch brand. If you grew up in the 90s and 2000s in the United States and maybe parts of Canada, you were definitely wearing Abercrombie and Fitch. And, it was this sort of trendy clothing line for, the upper middle class white teen who, wanted to look a certain way. And then of course, all the visible minorities, right? The people of color, Blacks, Browns, brown people who wanted to quote unquote fit in. And so, first things first, I would say, an organization that sort of builds itself on exclusivity and exclusion, as the Abercrombie brand did, right? Who looks the part, who acts the part, who behaves the part, in order to be an employee here. You start by preventing it, first of all, as a staff member, as a diversity and inclusion practitioner, as anybody in that space, to just speak truth to power, right? When you see the practices and you see the exclusionary behaviors, just first and foremost, call it out. As a practitioner myself, I would want to transform that place by, undertaking a review, find out where is exclusion happening in the organization, right? It may not be everywhere. In Abercrombie's case, it was across the entire organization. They definitely were, putting forth a certain brand and a certain look and feel. But sometimes when you're working at particularly a large corporation, that exclusion may not be everywhere, right? It may be in certain pockets of the organization. Certain departments may be having more exclusionary practices than others. So undertaking a review, figure out, okay, what groups are we not seeing? What are the barriers for their full participation? Understand why that exclusion is happening, and then plan strategically to transform the place, right? So you're checking your pipeline. Sometimes that exclusion is happening because of just geography, right? Where's the organization based? They want to be diverse, they want to be inclusive, but they're struggling because they can't get people to come physically where they are. Sometimes it happens because they're sourcing from the wrong places, right? Where they're posting their job ads, or they're using the wrong recruitment firms. So a review will help you to understand exactly, okay, why is this exclusion truly taking place? And then again, you can plan strategically to take deliberate actions to get the representation that you want where you need it most.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. As I was watching the Netflix series last night, one of the things that kept coming up for me was people who did not fit the mold of the advertising, or people who were not targeted, right, for the brand, wanted to be a part of that brand. And the words white supremacy culture kept coming up for me. What are your thoughts about that, when people are being intentionally exclusionary, and yet still people who are not to be included in that want to be a part of it?
Yeah, intentional exclusion and white supremacy culture is a thing, right? It happens so much where, the standard for us all has sort of been predefined, right? Even before our birth, right? We see it in movies and images, communications, messages, and the things that we constantly are internalizing. What resonated for me is that, a lot of times people of color themselves, they also want to fit in. And they, the differences among us and between us are sometimes highlighted or exposed when we're in spaces where we're the only one, right? Where we're tokenized, and we're, acting the part, playing the part, we're code switching, we're behaving in ways outside of our character, outside of our typical culture, whatever that might be. Because we want to sort of blend in, right? We don't want to stand out. We don't want to be hyper visible. And so it does speak to the sort of like whitewashing of our experiences of who we are. And it really isn't what we should be striving for in our society, right? Everybody should be able to be free to show up authentically as themselves without minimizing and downplaying who they are.
Right, right. I wanted to change it a little bit and talk about how you were previously a lawyer, and ask, how did your law career influence or lead you to diversity, equity, and inclusion work?
Oh, I would say that my work has begun long before the law degree. I would say I was probably on the path for a very, very long time. The earliest things I can remember are just always being justice minded as a child. Your family member says the wrong thing and you're like, what are you saying? That's discriminatory, or that's offensive, or like, no, the racial slurs that you sometimes hear, in your own family, you check them, the stereotypes that people kind of hurl to their mouths. And so, I've always been that person to speak up and speak out when people are being discriminated against, or described in ways that are unflattering, or you're using inappropriate or offensive language. And then I would say it led me to even to high school. I look back on, we had a Holocaust survivor come in to share his stories with us, and I was so intrigued. I read the Diary of Anne Frank, and I was so engrossed in this little girl's story, and I couldn't not even imagine that people were being treated differently by just having this Star of David. And so instinctively, it just always felt wrong. My earliest experience with racism myself was from a Filipino girl in kindergarten. You know, I remember one of my first school days in junior kindergarten. My mom loves to tell this story. Waiting on the school bus, a little girl others me, and she says, you know, we're all telling stories about where we're from, and all the little kids, oh, I'm from Canada, I'm from this place, I'm from that. You know, it comes to me and I share that, you know, I'm also from Canada. And, you know, she looks at me and she says, matter of factly, you're not. No, you're not. You're from Black land. And I was like flabbergasted. I ran to my mother and I was like, where's this Black land? Is this a real place? Why have you lied to me? Like, I thought it was from Canada, and now she's telling me that I'm not from here. And my mom was, of course, you go tell that little girl that that's where you're from. And that stayed with me. It let me know that people will other you in your own country, right? People will tell you where you belong. It happens time and time again. And how we saw it through the pandemic with Amy Cooper telling Christian Cooper in the park, you know, the dog walker in Central Park, that he didn't belong there, right? And it was probably the impetus for this business. But along the way, you know, I studied sociology in undergrad, women's and gender studies, you know, the sociology of HIV and AIDS. You know, if I look back, it's sort of like this eventual path to law school, to, you know, human rights, international law studies, to, you know, graduating and working at the Ontario Human Rights Commission, to, you know, working on behalf of, you know, immigrants, the immigrant serving community here, the immigrant sector, supporting the integration of professionals with highly skilled qualifications from all over the world to work in their professions. And then going and breaking barriers similarly for people with disabilities, implementing legislation and policies and reviewing practices with a variety of organizations. So I've done that work for a very, very long time. And again, it's just at the core of who I am, recognizing this is not just, this is not fair, this is not right, and constantly speaking out about it. And then my path to this work and my own company, the founding, truly did emerge post George Floyd. You know, but still, I would say it was more Amy Cooper that was the impetus for me to say no more, right? Enough of people telling us where we belong, telling us the spaces where we can and should exist. I definitely have the skills and the abilities to help organizations because I've been doing it for such a long time. I'm just going to do it independently now for myself. Nobody's going to tell me again that I don't belong in that workplace. They're not going to terminate me. I will show up authentically all the time and be myself and support the changes that I want to see in society so that my kids don't have to go through it.
Right, right. So you talked about the intersection of social justice and racial equity, how that was an impetus for you setting up your company, All Things Equitable.
Yeah.
How do you take an incident though, like the park incident, right? You know, what happened with the dog, right? How do you take that incident? How do you take George Floyd and apply that to a corporate setting, especially when you're showing up in that corporate setting and the mindset is that's out there, that's not in here?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations are jumping on the bandwagon right now. So it almost makes my entry point a little bit easier because somebody has compelled them to reach out to receive support. Right. Whether some of them want to do it, or they're being forced to do it by their board, their stakeholders. For me, it's of no import, right? The matter is the work is being done, the work needs to be done. And I see, you know, social justice and equity work as being intertwined, right? We need to address the disparities, the wealth gap, the opportunity gaps, who has access, who doesn't have access, who has power, who has privilege, and who doesn't in our society. And so my work within organizations is reviewing their systems, looking at precisely those things, who gets promoted, who gets mentored, who doesn't, why is that not happening, and providing sometimes those recommendations and suggestions to them. And when, you know, you kind of put it straight in their face, they can't run from it, right? The truth kind of hits them. Sometimes they know instinctively that they've been operating in a certain way. But when it's laid out in black and white and, you know, there are timelines and implementation strategies and plans tied to it, then, you know, they have to get to work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You recently had a LinkedIn post pick up traction regarding the hiring and firing of women of color at
Mhm.
Netflix.
Mm.
Could you please share with our community today and describe what is pet to threat and
Oh,
how this happens to
mhm.
people of color?
Sure. So yeah, that post went viral, didn't it? I didn't expect quite so many views. It's, almost 50,000 views now. And it was this a press release that I saw that Netflix had just recently terminated majority people of color, majority Black women from their workplace. And again, there's that reminder of experiences that happened to me personally, and to many, many women, right? I'm having conversations with women through my own YouTube series. I know we're going to talk about twice as hard, right? That phenomenon that we do work twice as hard in the workplace. And I'm realizing that the experiences that I've had, so many Black women have had across the diaspora, no matter where, if you're in the UK, you're in the Caribbean, you're in the Americas, somewhere, you've had these experiences where you're kept out systemically. And pet to threat is a phenomenon that has been studied, researched, and proven. So it's not, up for debate that Black women are indiscriminately terminated at a certain point in their journey in the workplace. Once, of course, they're not unionized, they're out of the way of protections by a union. Employers are, eagerly bringing us in. We're the quote unquote teacher's pet, the office pet, for want of a better phrase. The shining star, because of course we come in with all the qualifications and all the credentials and all the know-how and insights and skills that they can bear. But somewhere along the way, somebody's threatened by us, right? Our light is too bright. We're too smart. We're too outspoken. We're too creative. We just look the part. We look too damn good, right? Somebody along the way is not appreciative of the way that we're showing up, the way that we're presenting. They start to marginalize us. They start to, diminish us. They no longer want to hear our ideas. We get spoken over, we get tone policed. All of those things start happening eventually, to our termination. And there's, diagrams about this, and there's, proven studies that, this pet to threat phenomenon impacts us more than anybody else, right? It's that intersection of us being both female and Black, right? We're meeting sexism and racism simultaneously, anti-Black racism simultaneously through this phenomenon.
I know personally for me, the whole pet to threat, I felt the pet to threat thing happened to me because I went through a process as a Black woman of unlearning certain things and beginning to find my voice in corporate America. So certain things that I maybe before would have tolerated, now I wasn't tolerating, now I was speaking up. And then that's when you're kind of transitioning from, okay, she wasn't rocking the boat. Why is she rocking the boat? She's not just sitting there smiling and complying. So I went through that too, and I totally understand it. So
yeah, that's exactly it, right? We have a voice, and when we start to use that voice, ironically, in ways that they've hired us, for, right? Like I remember in places where I was a policy advisor, I'm literally paid to give you advice. And when I tell you, I give you the advice, I give you the options. Of course, the options are yours, but when you discount the entire thing, it's like, okay, here we go again, right? It starts to happen in small ways, and then bigger ways, and then you can see the writing on the wall, right? The
right.
last time I was going to be terminated from the workplace, I knew it was going to happen because I'd been through it once before. And the very last time I was like, okay, here we go again, right? I start working on my exit strategy because I'm like, when you start to marginalize me, you stop giving me work assignments, you no longer are talking to me in meetings, you're looking to the left of me, the right of me, you're talking, above and around and you're not talking directly to me. I know that the writing is on the wall, right? I'm no longer
Right.
a value of service, and my days are numbered. And so, yeah, Black women do wise to, prepare for that pet to threat phenomenon, right? Stack your pennies, stack your chips, particularly if you're in a leadership position, because the day will come when, they will walk you out the door without cause, right? There's always that lovely little clause in your contract that allows them to do that to you without consequence. unless you can negotiate to not have it in, which probably won't happen. And they know that this is happening, right? This is a phenomenon that they know is playing out, and they allow it. They put that provision in your contract purposely so that they can have the power over you, right? You need to behave in order to keep your job and keep your income. So, what a day it is when we no longer need the income, right? We've saved our money, we've got our side hustles, and we don't actually need that income. We don't need to take the abuse and the treatment that we receive.
And what you said earlier on now totally makes sense. You said, I now have my own company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm my own boss, and nobody can ever fire me again. You're calling the shots. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And I will speak truth to power until I no longer have a voice.
Right.
Yeah.
You alluded to your YouTube series.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that it's I guess the premise of the YouTube series is discussing how Black women must work twice as hard to get ahead in their careers.
Mm-hmm.
What has your audience learned through these stories?
Oh, so much. First of all, they've learned that we are just an excellent group of people, right? Black excellence is a thing, and particularly the Black excellence that comes with being, a Black woman. We are overqualified. We've worked twice as hard. We have all the credentials, all the certification, more so than anybody else, right? We saw that with the Honorable Ketanji Brown Jackson through the Supreme Court nomination and hearing process, that, she has more qualifications and credentials than anybody else, right? So they've learned that, at our core, we've had this idea entrenched in us, right? From our family members, through the legacy of slavery, that we need to work twice as hard in order to achieve anything in our society, right? They've learned a lot about the systemic harms that we've also experienced in the workplace, things like pet to threat, but also things like, microaggressions that we experience, how we, notions of professionalism, what that does to us, right? When we have to, relax our hair and we can't show up with the locks and the braids, and we sometimes hide the fact that we're neurodivergent, right? We have disabilities that we don't share or disclose for fear that we're going to be oppressed or treated differently. We've learned through the series, what happens when we come from a predominantly Black country, right? We don't have these experiences of being othered or being told that, we're not as good or qualified, and we don't have the pet to threat phenomenon playing out. But what happens when we actually come and we interact with them in white spaces, right? I've spoken to Jackie Abram about, just the racial trauma of being Black. Elizabeth Leiba, we talked about why it's important that we deconstruct these notions of professionalism, that we call things out. Black women learn a lot through the series too, right? About how to protect themselves in the workplace and how to show up authentically. But employers learn a lot, right? About how to just truly center wellness for us, how to allow us to show up authentically and be ourselves. And so that we don't have these experiences. They've just basically learned a lot about how to just stop the harms that are so commonplace. Again, no matter what part of the Americas we are in, once we are interacting, I've got viewers from France and from Canada and the United States, and even from the Caribbean, people who've lived their lives in the Caribbean and then migrated elsewhere, right? They've learned that, we're not all making it up. Right. You need to believe us, right? There's an episode actually that says "Believe Black Women," because what we tell you is happening to us is real, right? To stop the gaslighting and stop pretending that, what we're expressing and sharing isn't actually real.
And it's so necessary, because we need to, change comes from when people share stories. And I know that even as a woman, a Black woman in corporate America, I've learned from listening to other people's stories. And the narrative of the Black woman in America, and just I think in the corporate world, has changed. Because I remember when I started working, we had to have our hair relaxed. We were trying to be as white as possible. We were trying to fit in as much as possible. And now with the Crown Act, that narrative has changed. And I know even for myself, I said this earlier on, I'm having to unlearn certain things that were just given. It was just a given. If you made it in, quote unquote, you pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you made it in, you weren't rocking the boat, and there were just certain rules of engagement. So that space that you have on the YouTube channel is a very necessary space for women of color, and hopefully allies, people who are not Black, go and listen so that they can begin to understand the plight of the Black woman within corporate America. We are not always angry Black women, and we have that attached to us, you know? So I know, because I was always trying to not appear to be angry and Black, I sat and I kept very quiet. I spoke in low tones. I wasn't as animated because I was trying to fit in. So, you know, you're not bringing your whole self to work because you're working within all these systems that you're just trying to be a part of. So
yes, you're trying to survive, right? We're literally trying to survive, and then these labels get put upon us, like angry, like aggressive, like loud, that are so problematic, right? We talk about that. There's an episode talking about labeling and othering other Black women, and that happens to us so often. We're not given the grace or the space and the permission to just sometimes be angry like everybody else. It is a natural emotion, and if we get angry, why does that label have to be applied? You're infuriating us, and then you're victimizing us again by throwing the label on top of us, right? If I'm angry, it's for a reason. It's not irrational behavior to sometimes be angry, right? When we're dealing with racism and harms and traumas in the workplace, it is a natural response, right? And so for us to have to push that down, it is harmful. It is harmful. And it will come out in other ways, right? And because we repress it so much, sometimes it just flies out. Doesn't always make us look cool or we look uncouth, but who cares, right? Because we've been through so much, and we can be triggered, and the traumas that we have are totally real. And so we have a right to respond in the normal human range of emotions as everyone else, without the labels coming and being applied to us.
How can Black women protect their well-being and mental health while also fighting for the respect that they deserve?
Set boundaries. Step one, right? Know yourself, know what your boundaries are, and stand by them, right? Don't allow people to railroad you, right? I have to set them in my business. I've had to set them even in places where I've worked before, right? What assignments are you going to take? What assignments will you not take, right? If they've hired you for one job and they're asking you to make coffee every morning, is that something that you're willing to do? Right? So start there, right? Start by figuring out what your boundaries are. I would also say, make sure you have outlets for your emotional well-being, right? Whether that's speaking to, a therapist, a friend, a spouse, you're going for a walk, do something that allows you to release the things that are happening to you and share them. Don't bottle them in. Sometimes it's happened to me, we bottle them in, we suppress them, and then, we're venting to our friends over the lunch break, or, we're calling our spouse on the drive home, screaming and yelling about exactly what happened to us. Yes, get a Black therapist. I see that, Bianca, tomorrow. Yes, get a therapist, right? There's no shame in seeking out mental health support and resources, accessing them and getting the treatments that we need. And I would also say, do things for Black joy, like just to be not just Black joy, but just joy generally, right? If you are racialized in the workplace, you are experiencing traumas and harms. I don't care what your background is, right? If you are Jewish or Arab or, Middle East, whatever it is, you are experiencing things and harms that, just because we live in this white supremacist system that others us and doesn't expect the best of us. So do things for joy, do things that make you happy. That's restorative as well.
I would add, go watch your YouTube channel for tips.
Yeah, there's tons of tips. I mean, that's a space I say for inclusive leaders, right? If you are an inclusive leader, you're there, on the All Things Equitable YouTube channel, watching and listening, taking notes and learning. There is something in every single episode. I promise you, no two stories are the same. No two episodes are the same. Every single time I'm having these conversations, I'm learning and I'm listening as well. And I think it's important that if, you claim to be an ally, you're actually doing the work to center the voices of the people who are the most marginalized in our society, and you're actually listening.
And a forum like that allows people to know that I'm not alone and I'm not crazy. Because sometimes when you walk away from work, you feel like, was that me? Like you said, gaslighting, right? You feel like you're crazy, but when you hear the stories of other people, you realize that you're not alone in this journey, and people have lived through it and have ways that they have come to figure out how to resolve it. So I want to pivot a little bit. You mentioned Jewish, whoever you are, Jewish, whatever. I wanted to talk to you about religious accommodations.
Sure, yes.
Specifically when it comes to Black female Muslims, right? And I've just finished reading a book written by a Black female Muslim called Me and White Supremacy. Okay. I don't know if anyone here has read it, but it totally breaks down, and it's written for the allies, right? And she is a Black female Muslim living, I think, in the United Arab Emirates. But are religious accommodations given enough consideration when it comes to DEI work? And specifically thinking of Black female Muslims.
All right, where do I start? There was definitely a whole lot of consideration for, religious accommodations when it came time to, almost discriminate against people on religious grounds when, people didn't want to get vaccinated, okay? I don't know what was happening in the States, but vaccine policies and mandates emerged all over in every organization, because it was like, go get a note from your religious clergy person, and we're gonna discount that and tell you that we're not going to accommodate you, and you got to go get vaccinated, right? There was forced vaccination. So there's definitely not enough attention that is being paid for the need for a religious accommodation, or even the support for religious practices in the workplace. It is an afterthought. Even in corporate demographic surveys, I was reviewing one just yesterday, and I had to remind a client, you've asked about age, and you've asked about sexual orientation, you've asked about gender, you've asked about all of these things, right? Where did you come from? What language do you speak? Blah, 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 blah. But you had no questions on religious identities in the workplace, right? So that's step one, making sure that you're considering religious accommodations and the need for and the support for religious practices in your workplace, and that it's a necessary dimension of diversity that you are calling out, looking for, assessing, and considering in your work. Number two, where are your staff going to pray throughout the day, right? A lot of people pray throughout the day, multiple times a day. If you're Muslim, you got to do it 5 times, right? Educate yourself, inform yourself on the religious practices, and then learn how to best to support them, right? A lot of organizations are, shying away from, quote unquote prayer rooms, and they're calling them quiet rooms, right? But no one's going to go pray in a quiet room, right? They're carving out spaces and creating all these places, but a quiet room where people are bending down, doing downward dog, is not a place where you're going to find someone who wants to go and, pray throughout the day. So make sure your prayer rooms are truly for prayer. They're not for yoga. They're not for meditation. They're not for all this other stuff. Also think about, do you have the right holy books in there, right? Is there the Torah? Do you have the Quran? Do you have a Bible? Make sure there's a variety of religious books. Think about, can people take off their shoes before entering? Many people take their shoes off to pray. Do you have water nearby, right? A lot of people need to wash their hands, wash their face, wash their feet, whatever it is. Is there a source of water, right? You're erecting a space. Is it facing the right direction? Does it have light coming in? Are people going to actually use it, right? So do things that are intentional. I love that, because that's the title of this podcast, right? Be intentional, be inclusive, consult with the variety of people within your space, the variety of religions that you may have represented, and learn how best to support and accommodate them. Don't create, well, let's just create a prayer room for prayer room's sake. It's not facing the right direction. There's no water source. You don't even have the right holy books, and someone's bending down doing downward dog. No one's going to actually go in there, right? Put a shoe rack outside, let them take their shoes off. And then consider things like time off requests. Are you celebrating only the Christian religious holidays, right? Easter and Christmas and, whatever, right? There's so many more holidays. So allow, give people a bank of time and allow them to take the days that suits them, right? It's beneficial for your organization if you do it that way, so that you have continued coverage in times where you may normally be closed, right? You want to close for 2 weeks at Christmas time, well, why not stay open? Because people who don't celebrate Christmas can actually be on site, right? And there are a lot of religious holidays, Ramadan, Eid, Hanukkah, and many, many others, right? Those are just some of the major ones that come up throughout the year that we can be intentional about giving people the time off for without them having to take vacation days, right? That's just not an inclusive way to go about it. So be fair, be reasonable, be equitable.
Janelle, you're suggesting vacation days and then a bank of days that people can take for anything that they want to? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Well, why not give people a bank of days throughout the year? Everyone can get the same number of days and you use them as you'd like to, right? If that's, if you're giving everybody, let's say you're giving everyone 3 weeks vacation plus, I don't know, 8 statutory holidays. So let's call it a bank of, I'm making up this number, you get a bank of 50 days that you can take throughout the year. Allow people to take them when they want to. Don't designate it to say, well, you've got to take those days at Christmas, you've got to take, Good Friday off. Let people do what they need to do to support their own religious practices and just be respectful. It's just easy.
That's actually a best practice that we recommend to our clients at NWC, just to have floating holidays for people to use as they choose that they want to. I might be an adoptive parent and I want to take, adoptive parents' day off to celebrate, so that is a great best practice. So I put in chat if we have any questions for people to bring questions to Janelle. And Lenroy, I saw you put in a question in chat and I wanted to ask, did you want to come off mute and present your question to Janelle?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me good?
Hi.
Great. Hey, great session today, great conversation, lots and lots of topics. I was actually curious about the actual defining moment. You spoke about kind of the journey, but I'm interested in, was it a defining moment that you pivoted from seeking employment and then I'm going to do this full time? Kind of what happened and what advice do you give for those that are out there pivoting as well? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I would say for me, it was a combination of things, but the most pivotal moment for me was the Amy Cooper incident, right? I think the proximity of, my workplace termination, I was laid off for 2 years. I found a job right before the pandemic. I was happy. It was, at a higher level. It was a director level. I was previously a manager, but it paid me $40,000 less. But it was closer to home. I no longer had like an hour and a half commute in each direction. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to take this job, right? But I asked them to not start me at the bottom of the range. They had, it was $40,000 drop, but I thought, okay, at least can I not start at the bottom of your range? It's minuscule, 8 minutes down the road, higher title, blah, blah, blah. And I asked them to waive the probationary period for the benefits to begin. I'm a mom, mom of 2. I earned more than my spouse at the time. And, we needed that benefits coverage. And I said to them, can we waive that probationary period so that the benefits can actually start right away? I was already receiving coverage from my previous employer still. And they said to me, sure, not a problem. I will, my hiring manager said, I'll look at it. I'll take a look. And if it is that, there's room in the budget, I can, maybe start you at the middle of the range. And if you're a rock star, we'll get you to the top of that range in 3 months. I said, okay, great. And she said, I'll go back to HR and I'll ask them about the waiver of the period for benefits. The next thing that came across was an email telling me that the job offer was rescinded. And eventually, basically the gist of it was that I was being too greedy. I had asked for too much in negotiating for myself to not start at the bottom of their minuscule range and to waive the probationary period. They took back the job offer. And the sad thing about it was they could have said, unfortunately, we're locking down tomorrow, like the province is closing. due to the pandemic, we'll revisit your opportunity or this offer at another point in time. We don't know when, blah, blah, blah. They didn't do that. They blamed it on me. So there was that. After, celebrating with my family, going out shopping, buying clothes, seeing the office where I'm going to be working, meeting the colleagues that I was going to be leading, getting excited about a job, having it rescinded was, after 2 years of a layoff, was just devastating, right? I was, I would say, suicidal at that point. I contemplated even taking my own life. So there was that. And then still I was like, okay, got to get back in the race, got to look for jobs. Started, was on LinkedIn, still looking on the job pages. George Floyd happened, but Ahmaud Arbery happened. George Floyd happened. There was some incidents in Canada where people were also killed. And then the very next day after George Floyd was, Amy Cooper wrangling this dog in the park, and calling the police on Christian Cooper. And that set me off. I had enough. I said, okay, enough with these organizations telling us where we belong. It had happened to me, obviously I don't belong where I was. I had a leader actually denigrate me and tell me, I don't have the leadership competencies she requires, right? In this massive corporation. There was no other place that I could have worked or been, right? With my leadership skills and abilities and all the things that I'd been through. So for me, it was just a combination of factors, but still I was looking for a job. And then after Amy Cooper happened, I thought, okay, no more. I've just had enough of white women in particular, telling us where we belong, what to do, how to do it. I've got what it takes to do this for myself. And I just went full force, full speed ahead. Advice to people who want to do this, I definitely say, believe in yourself, right? If you've got a skill or a talent, I don't care what it is, if you can, draw or paint or dance or sing, leverage that, leverage your talents, your skills, your abilities, believe in yourself, hang out your own shingle, and find ways to connect with people around what you're doing, and sell your services. I think it was the best decision I ever made. And I'll never not have my company on the side. I will never not do this again. And it's funny, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I've socialized like most of us to go to school, get a job, go to school, get a job, not go to school and create a job. But I highly recommend it. The fear was really holding me back, never thinking, okay, I don't know how I'm going to be a business owner. What am I going to sell, right? But once you figure it out, I had some divine inspiration as well, I would say. When I couldn't stop thinking about starting my own business, I'd be sleeping and dreaming about, okay, what am I going to call the company, and who am I going to serve, and who am I going to support, and what would my mission be? And I would get up in the middle of the night and feverishly be taking notes in the dark on my phone. That's when I knew I had to launch. So I launched in August, or I incorporated in August of 2020. So that's to tell you how quickly after May 25th or May 26th, when George Floyd and Amy Cooper happened, to, August 19th is when I officially incorporated, and then I launched right after Labor Day. So that's how quickly it was that I'm not looking for a job anymore. Enough of me searching on LinkedIn for a job. Like, that was enough.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for being so transparent and so vulnerable, because you've showed us, you've modeled for us how personal experiences, personal rejection, you were rejected personally, you were hurting, but it took the things that were happening on the outside to really make you begin to live your full purpose, who you really are. And you mentioned earlier on about Black women letting your light shine bright. So it took all those, it took Amy Cooper in the park to make you reach out to be the best version of yourself. So thank you for that.
It took a whole lot of white women pushing me out of organizations. Yes. And honestly, it was the rescinding of that job offer was also a racialized woman. She was, she's a brown woman, but she had to go to the white CEO and another white man to have the decisions made. And it was them that, told her what to do, because from her end, when we had the conversation, all was well, she was going to consider it. So it spoke to me that here we go again with white people deciding our future and what was going to be best for us. And I just had enough of that. So
thank you for
that's why I
sharing.
went. No problem.
Andrea, you had a question. Did you want to come off mute to socialize your question, or did you want me to read it out for you? Andrea?
Maybe she's gone. Andrea Payne, oh, there she's there. She says to please read. Can you read it for her?
Absolutely. What recommendations can you offer to businesses who want to be inclusive without them constantly targeting the lone member of a marginalized group to put together the DEI event?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll start by saying, that's a boundary that if you're a person of color that you just need to set for yourself. If you don't have event planning skills, backgrounds, or even desire, tell your employers no, right? I'm not an event planner. That's not what I'm good at. I was hired to do X, Y, or Z, not this. It's an absolute no, right? Just set that boundary and say no. If you feel compelled to do it and you can't set that boundary, a lot of times it's happening to employee resource group members. You've signed up to be on this task force or this committee, and then they, download all the responsibility for planning, Black History Month to you or what have you. For the organizations that do that, I would say, you're harming your staff, first of all, right, who may not want to do that. So always seek volunteers first. Number two, I would say, reach out to the experts, right? There are professionals out there who can event plan and do these things on your behalf that you don't have to tap your extremely, tired and exhausted workforce to add responsibilities to them without compensation. So I would say, compensate your people if it is that, there's a stipend that you can give. It can be small, but show appreciation, give recognition where it's due for the labor, right? The days of like unpaid labor should be over, right? Like we should be compensated and rewarded for our skills and our talents and our abilities and our hard work, right? If we're doing something for you, just compensate us, stop taking us for granted. And so, yeah, I would say set those boundaries if you're a staff member and you don't want to do something and you don't have the talents, then just say no. And if that is you're being exploited, ask for compensation, inquire, what will we be paying our resource group members or our volunteers who speak at this event or who, put this together? What recognition can we give them? Can we reward them in some way?
Thank you so much. Tina McDaniel, you had a question. Did you want to come off mute to ask Janelle a question? Your question?
Sure, I will. There's so much good conversation. I don't even know if I remember my question. I almost feel like there needs to be a part 2 of this discussion. I feel like it's my story. I think my question was around, you talked about exclusionary practices and evaluating exclusionary practices within an organization. Is there a recommendation for a guideline or a tool that would be a good resource to begin that process within an organization?
Yeah, I mean, I always customize everything that I do. So my instinct is like, I'll create that tool. And I do that. I figure out what an organization needs and then I customize objective tools and frameworks that they can use and apply to do their work so that, those personal biases and things don't come into play. Is there something external that I can think of off the bat? Let me think on that, Tina. And if there's something that comes to me, I mean, there's stuff that I'm always reading, right? I'm always looking at articles on Medium and Forbes and New York Times and things like that. If you drop your email in the chat and I find something, I promise you I'll send you something.
Okay, thank you so much. You've already shared some great ideas, so I appreciate that. And
yeah, there's always objective things that objective frameworks. Korn Ferry always has some things that they put out on inclusive leadership. They're always talking about leadership. And sometimes once in a while, there's some great resources or objective tools in them that you can, rinse and repeat and use for whatever you need to do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shaniqua, would you like to come off mute and share your question?
Can you all hear me? Sometimes my mic doesn't work on Zoom. Good morning. My question was, what resources, and I think you might have just answered some of that just now, but just kind of wondering what resources you use to kind of stay abreast of the DEI trends to make sure you're pretty much on top of your game and your work here.
Yes, so I would say I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly enrolled in some educational program in order to stay on top. LinkedIn Learning has tons and tons of free resources, so let's start there. I just completed a workplace mental health and leadership program through Morneau Chappelle, an EFAP provider here in Canada, in association with Queen's University. So there's a mental health work leadership program that you can sign up for. I just also completed Indigenous awareness certification program through First Nations University. So, you know, find the courses out there. There's lots through Cornell that you don't even have to pay for if it is that you want to enhance your understanding of reconciliation and how to reconcile with, you know, our colonial past and Indigenous peoples and things like that. So I would say start there with the, you know, the foundations and the basics, and then look on LinkedIn Learning. There's always courses and resources. And then in terms of what I'm doing, I'm constantly reading. I read all the time, all day, every day. I just mentioned a few resources. I'm on Forbes. I'm looking at Medium. I'm on, you know, looking at New York Times. What are they saying? I follow anti-racism writers and practitioners. My favorites are Dana Brownlee, Janice Gassam. Those two write for Forbes. Sharon Hurley Hall. She has a fantastic anti-racism newsletter that I highly recommend. So look those ladies up. If you're reading anything that they put out, you're constantly going to be learning about anti-racism and inclusivity and how to change organizations for the better. Janice is fantastic. And Sharon Hurley Hall, yeah, she'll also, Sharon's newsletter, she likes to expose other anti-racism writers, so she will put you in touch. So I'm constantly reading. I read things from, you know, feminist theory and thought. I read, you know, lots of things, even from allies that they put out. I'm connected to a great group of even white allies who write. Emily, oh, I'm forgetting her name. Emily Weltman. She's a fantastic one to follow. Constantly writing about the patriarchy and, you know, how do we dismantle the patriarchy? So definitely look her up. She's on LinkedIn, as of all the ladies. You can find them all. And of course, Nika, right? Dr. Nika White. Like, let's be real. You got to connect with Dr. Nika White.
I was waiting for you to say that. I was waiting for Nika White. Yes.
You're all here, right? So,
right.
I mean, that doesn't need to be said, but she's also somebody that I follow, connect with. If you look at the guests on my YouTube series, connect with all of them for starters. If you're reading their books, you're looking at Teresa M. Robinson, you're reading Black Exhaustion. She writes a book called Black Exhaustion about literally being, you know, tired of like the white Karens in the workplace.
I'm quoted in that book, by the way.
Yeah, so am I. It's so nice to have one of my, having, you know, she took, I think, 50 Black women and she, we were able to write a little bit of a statement.
Right. And
it's kind of sprinkled throughout that book. So get a look at Black Exhaustion, and then you can read, you know, like I support the people that I follow. So here's Minda Harts. She has a book called Right Within, and it's how to heal from workplace trauma. You know, like buy the books. Sharon Hurley Hall that I just mentioned, you know, she explores shadeism. Tarnished is one that I'm also in. It's by, you know, a white woman by an older like white lady by the name of Marianne Kerr that, you know, kind of we befriended on LinkedIn. I have a whole chapter in here about how to create equitable, inclusive workplaces. This is a mental health book, again, by Aisha Saint-Tiche, all about, you know, how you're just getting started, and it's got real life stories and how women can step into their power, navigate the world of uncertainty, and rewrite what success means. So I buy books, I follow people. I'm constantly listening, learning, reading from other practitioners who are enriching me and, you know, filling my cup up. Dr. Nika White, you know, continue to watch her show. And that's kind of how I stay grounded and connected to what's happening. And I try to shut off the news as much as I can, right? Because I get it through my social media anyway. So I actually didn't see the news last weekend. I heard the news and I saw it coming across my feed and I knew it had happened, but I didn't turn on CNN and watch it ad nauseum like I would have done in the past. So I'm blocking out the things that are going to be harmful to me and my psyche, and I'm bringing in things that are going to be positive and healing. So that's my recommendation.
I have
Thank
to
you.
agree. I have to agree with Tina. We probably need a part 2. There was another question on
Yeah.
how you pivoted from looking for a job to running a successful business. So I wanted to thank you. We're at the top of the hour. Thank you for this time. You have filled our cup with so much information. It's
Thank you.
evident to us that you love the work that you're doing and you're in the right place. So thank you, everyone. I'm just going to ask for everyone to come off mute and thank Janelle for this time that she spent with us today.
Thank you. I'd be
Thank
happy
you.
to be back.
Thank you.
Thank
And if you,
Thank
you want to connect with
Awesome.
me,
so much, Janelle.
Thank
I'm on
you.
LinkedIn. You can connect with me at All Things Equitable on all major platforms. Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend and we'll see you next week. Dr. Nika White will be back. She was here
Bye.
watching and speaking in the background, but she'll be back in person next week.
Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
everyone. Thank
This
you,
was a great
Janelle.
conversation.
Yes, yes, thank you.